Thanks for tuning into our video on Massachusetts lease and landlord-tenant laws. As a landlord, you need to know your rights and responsibilities to manage your property well. With that in mind, here are some important landlord-tenant laws in the Bay State. First, let's discuss the lease. The lease agreement is the foundation of the landlord-tenant relationship. It's a legally binding contract between a landlord and tenant that sets the terms of the rental relationship. The most common type of lease agreement is a one-year, fixed-term lease that terminates at the end of the lease term. This is often referred to as a standard lease agreement. Beyond the basic terms of the lease, there are some additional things that Massachusetts landlords must include in their rental contract. Within 15 days of the start of the lease agreement, the landlord must provide the tenant with the terms and conditions for fire insurance on the property. Within 10 days of either the lease signing or receipt of the security deposit, whichever is later, the landlord must provide the tenant with a statement of condition documenting the condition of the property at the start of the tenancy. When the landlord collects a security deposit, the landlord must provide the tenant with a security deposit receipt within 10 days of receiving the security deposit or the start of the tenancy, whichever is later. Within 30 days of receiving the security deposit, the landlord must provide the tenant with a follow-up statement, stating the name and address of the bank where the deposit is being held, the amount being held, and the account number. Pursuant to federal law, if a property was built before 1978, tenants must be provided with a lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet.
Next, let's talk about key landlord-tenant laws in Massachusetts. The security deposit may not exceed 1 month's rent. The deposit must be returned within 30 days of the end of the tenancy. Landlords must provide tenants with reasonable notice when entering for non-emergencies. We recommend always providing at least 24 hours written notice and only entering during reasonable hours. There are no limits on the amount a Massachusetts landlord may charge for late fees. However, late fee policies must be discussed in the lease agreement and should be reasonably related to the expenses incurred due to the late payment. Massachusetts landlords may require tenants to get renters insurance and can make failure to do so a breach of the lease agreement. This is something we always encourage landlords to do. Landlords may charge a returned payment fee of $25 for payment amounts of $2,500 and higher, or 1% of the payment amount for checks less than $2,500. All Massachusetts landlords should be familiar with lease termination and renewal laws. Fixed-term leases terminate at the end of the term unless otherwise stated in the lease agreement. Either party can terminate month-to-month leases with 30 days' notice. Massachusetts does not impose a limit on how much a landlord can increase rent. However, the lease should specify the procedures and notice requirements for rent increases.
Massachusetts landlords must comply with all safety regulations and keep rental units in a habitable condition. This includes ensuring essential services like plumbing, heating, and electricity function correctly. Tenants should promptly notify landlords of any needed repairs. Tenants in Massachusetts have specific rights, including the right to withhold rent if the landlord fails to make necessary repairs in a reasonable time. Retaliation by the landlord against tenants is strictly prohibited. If a tenant fails to pay rent or violates the lease agreement, the landlord may start the eviction process. When doing so, landlords must adhere strictly to Massachusetts law. Landlords can never resort to self-help eviction methods, such as changing locks or shutting off utilities. Congratulations, you're now ready to create a Massachusetts lease and manage your Massachusetts rental unit. While the lease laws might sound complicated, keep in mind that our Massachusetts lease automatically includes all required disclosures and gives you state assist tips as you create your lease. Before you turn over possession of your rental, make sure you screened all tenants, have an executed Massachusetts lease agreement, and you've collected the entire security deposit and first month's rent. As you manage your rental, remember that we have over 400 property management forms, including Massachusetts state-specific forms. Visit easylandlordforms.com to start your tenant screening. Create a Massachusetts Lease Agreement that's guaranteed to comply with all Massachusetts lease laws and access Massachusetts property management forms.